Yesterday, it was reported that shortly after an anti-ICE rally, an armed anti-fascist man showed up with firebombs and a rifle and began throwing incendiary devices at the ICE facility and vehicles. He was shot and killed. And I hate to say I told you so. It's not something I wanted to have to do, but this is exactly what I said was going to happen. Over the past couple of years, there's been an increase in violence. There was one incident where a man planted bombs on a Confederate statue. At that time, I said, it's not going to stop here. The main reason I think it won't stop is that no action is really being taken to stop them, and American cultural establishments, the media particularly, excuse and defend Antifa every step of the way, which means so long as they are given clearance by the left to excuse their violence, they'll continue. There's no real ramifications. And thus we see the results of the rhetoric of people like Shaun King and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and others who said these detention facilities are concentration camps. Before I read this, let me just say one thing. The conditions at these facilities, some of them are bad, really bad, but they're not nearly as bad relative to our actual prison system. Why would we see people calling for the liberation of these camps and not our actual prisons where men are raped and beaten and killed? It just doesn't make sense. It's political extremism. The only end goal is just being political extreme. These people are blind and they're crazy. And thus, one of them showed up to an ICE facility armed with firebombs, and now he's dead. And what's even scarier, Antifa is still allowed to operate on Twitter. People are calling for more. So I ask you, where does this go next? Because I think the answer is obvious. When Ocasio-Cortez said they are concentration camps, I asked, where does this go next? We then see Shaun King say they must be liberated by any means necessary. I ask again, what happens next? And here we are from Fox News. Now, before we get started, please head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's multiple ways you can do it: PayPal, crypto, physical address. But of course, share this video because YouTube certainly won't. I assure you the language I'm using is going to result in a deranking and demonetization. There's two different things. Because of the words in this, it'll probably be found not suitable for audiences, which means it won't appear in recommendations or searches nearly as much as other channels. It'll absolutely be demonetized. Let's read. Armed man shot, killed after throwing incendiary devices at Washington ICE detention center. Police in Washington State say an armed man was shot and killed early Saturday after trying to attack a local ICE detention center. The Seattle Times reported that the unidentified man appeared outside the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma with a rifle and threw incendiary devices at both the facility and nearby propane tanks, at one point setting a vehicle on fire. Officers responded to the incident around 4 a.m. and called out to the man before shots were fired. It was not clear how many shots were fired or whether the man fired at police. Police spokesman Loretta Cool said the officers weren't wearing body cameras, but the area is covered by surveillance cameras from the detention center. The 4 officers involved were placed on administrative leave in accordance with the department's policy. None of them were injured. ICE said in a statement that no employees were harmed nor involved in this tragic incident. The shooting took place hours after a rally in front of the detention center to protest planned mass deportation raids around the country. The Tacoma facility, which is run by the Department of Homeland Security, holds migrants pending deportation proceedings. The detention center has also held immigration-seeking parents separated from their children under President Donald Trump's zero-tolerance policy, an effort meant to deter illegal immigration. They say GEO Group, which runs the 1,575-bed Northwest Detention Center, in an email to the Associated Press, said baseless accusations about how detainees are treated at its facilities have led to misplaced aggression and a dangerous environment for our employees, whose safety is our top priority. Violence of any kind against our employees and property will not be tolerated. We are thankful for the quick and brave action by the Tacoma Police Department, which prevented innocent lives from being endangered. They go on to talk about planned ICE raids. The ICE raids are going to be carried out. These are people who have court orders to leave the country. There's an interesting thread by Shaun King. I want you to take a look at this. This is his pinned tweet as of right now. I just took this screenshot. History has taught us that concentration camps should be liberated. We cannot and should not wait until 2020 with the hope that we defeat Trump to free these children. We should liberate them now by any means necessary, he says. My latest for The Intercept. Where do you think it goes after you say any means necessary? Any. We end up seeing Antifa showing up and making these attacks. Journalist Jake Hanrahan tweeted about the incident, and he followed up. The guy who attacked the ICE detention center was a 69-year-old anarchist named Will Van Spronson. This is him. He says, my source is not the police report, by the way. It's been confirmed to me who he was. Van Spronson was a longtime anti-fascist. Written by Van Spronson in 2011, he said, are we really willing to submit to laws regulating every little detail of our existence on this planet? Inane laws imposed by those who simultaneously allow and encourage the exploitation and despoiling of the planet and life upon it for the sake of progress and growth? And a house of cards called the economy? He says there's staggering change on the horizon. This is an old post. Jake Hanrahan then says, it looks like Willem von Spronson was also a member of the anti-fascist John Brown Gun Club of Puget Sound. That's him on the left from their Facebook. In this, you can see him wearing the John Brown Gun Club hat. This is significant because what I've talked about before, there was articles from Vox saying the left needs to get armed to defend their communities. What do we see? What comes next? How many times do I need to ask? It is staring you in the face. And Twitter allows this. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being hyperbolic. It does. Take a look at this tweet. This person says that they hope it results in more. This is from this morning. I'm legit thinking this is the start of something big, the black flag in their account. Twitter allows this. Here we have a story from Legal Insurrection with just a little bit of details I want to highlight. A statement from someone who claims to have been a friend of Van Spronson. The Seattle Times reports, Deb Bartley, a friend of Van Spronson's for about 20 years, described him, let me zoom in here for those watching, described him as an anarchist and anti-fascist, and believes his attack on the detention center intending to provoke a fatal conflict. He was ready to end it. I think it was suicide. But then he was able to kind of do it in a way that spoke to his political beliefs. I know he went down there knowing he was going to die. She and other friends of Van Spronson got letters in the mail just saying goodbye. He also wrote what she referred to as a manifesto, which she declined to discuss in detail, but predicted would be taken by authorities. They say Maru Mora Villapando, an activist with the group La Resistencia, which has frequently protested the conditions at the detention center and broader immigration policy, said she did not know Van Spronson himself, nor was La Resistencia involved with the June 2018 protest at which he was arrested. The 2018 protest involved about 160 people outside the detention center. About 40 people blocked a police car that had arrived, prompting the officer to call in backup. In court documents, Van Spronson was accused of lunging at a police officer's neck to help free a 17-year-old protester who was being detained. Van Spronson refused to comply with officers' orders, and he was led through the crowd of protesters. Police said he tried to pass the baton to another protester. Van Spronson was punched in the face at least once during the altercation. 9 other people were arrested as well. He pled guilty in Pierce County Superior Court to 1 count of obstructing an officer, gross misdemeanor, etc. I bring this up because we know now he was Antifa aligned, but also member of an armed anti-fascist gun club. Vox wrote a story talking about how the left needs to get armed to defend their communities. And this is what we can see. The way I explained it was, I've seen some of these armed groups left and right before, and they seem to be disciplined. They seem to understand how to be safe with their firearms, and they're in their legal right to go out with their firearms. But what I said is that outside of those who are trained and have discipline, you will eventually get a crazy person who won't think twice or care, and they will fire that gun. We're not quite there yet necessarily, but we are seeing that someone who, according to images on the Facebook of the Puget Sound John Brown Gun Club, had the hat, seemingly a member, showing up with a gun and firebombs at a federal facility and lobbing them at propane tanks and the building, setting a car on fire, being shot and killed. We can hop over here and take a look at what Twitter shows you when you search his name. Robbie Starbuck tweets, did dangerous rhetoric from Democrat activists, media, and politicians inspire Willem Van Spronson? What did they think would happen if they recklessly compared the border crisis to concentration camps? We have Ocasio-Cortez, we have Sean King, which I highlighted, and then we have Vox. She's right, they say. Vox has not only said they're concentration camps, they've also have gone on to said you need to get armed. Take a look at this story from The Intercept. Sean King writes at the end of June, history taught us that concentration camps should be liberated. We can't wait until 2020. I don't necessarily want to read the entire thing. I don't know how long it is, but but let's read a little bit. He says, yes, we do have concentration camps. Began the stinging critique of the Trump administration's immigration detention facilities. It was written earlier this week by the editorial board of the Salt Lake Tribune in the reliably conservative state of Utah. Andrea Pitzer, author of the definitive book on the global history of concentration camps, agrees. So do people who were once forced to live in another era's concentration camps. Full stop. There have been Holocaust survivors who have come out and said they're not. There have been, I believe it was the Holocaust Museum, pushed back on AOC. It doesn't matter. Sean King will find the sources that fit his worldview and he will push them and he will call for violence. That is what he is doing. He is calling for violence and he is calling for escalation. And every single time we say enough, stop them, they don't. They point the finger at the fringe extremists on the right, of which many of us, moderate, conservative, center left, also disagree with and say enough, stop them. But they don't. They don't stop the left. They point to people like me and claim that we're in favor of extremism while advocating for extremism. It's interesting. I can sit here and say to you, I don't care if you're left or right. These violent extremists and those who seek to accelerate and push towards civil war should be stopped. And what do they say? They say, you're the bad guy to those of us calling for nonviolence, calling for an end to the violence, and then they call for violence. They are the bad guys. They are. They're trying to destroy our way of life. They are trying to upend the system and cause complete and total chaos. Their motto, by any means necessary. And that is what Sean King has said himself. How this man is being propped up by Glenn Greenwald's The Intercept, how he is allowed to post this on Twitter, it's mind-blowing. It is. Let's read a little bit more what he says. Let's move on now. Let's go get to the point where he says, cruelty is the point. It's not an accident. These systems are cruel by design. The idea is to make it miserable to deter people from coming to the U.S. These detention centers are reckless and dangerous. As many pointed out, we need to remember exactly how and why the teenage diarist Anne Frank actually died. She was not gassed to death. Instead, she died of neglect, malnutrition, and disease. It is believed that she and her sister Margot contracted and died from typhus. In 1944, a minor miracle occurred when Annette Blitz, a lifelong childhood friend and classmate of Anne's, was transferred to the Bergen-Belsen camp where the Frank sisters were being held. She was no more than a skeleton by then. She was wrapped in a blanket. She couldn't bear to wear her clothes anymore. There's a difference. He's trying to make it seem like what America is doing is the same. It's not. These are people who've traveled great distances and spent thousands of dollars to come to the United States, full well knowing that these camps are overcrowded and they'll be separated from their children. I am absolutely not defending the policies of Donald Trump. I'm making a straight point about people who would come from Angola, in Africa, spend thousands of dollars flying across the Atlantic to Brazil, then traveling up thousands of miles through South America, through Central America, through Mexico to come to our southern border and then be detained. There is a stark difference there between what Germany did, rounding up its own citizens based on religious beliefs and arbitrary life aspects, and then putting them in camps where they subsequently were killed or died. There's a huge difference. In fact, what ICE is trying to do is send these people back to their homes. They're being deported. They're not forced to stay here, but they're coming anyway. And they would have you believe it's the same thing. He says, right now we have prison camps across the U.S. where the same thing is happening. Incorrect. Absolutely not. This man is a dangerous extremist. Sean King may be one of the most dangerous extremists in our culture today. And I say that only based on what we're seeing now. And it should have been apparent to those when he made these tweets. He is a high-profile individual. He is lying and manipulating the conversation. He is pushing outright extremism and calling for violence. I will say this with no fear. It is a statement of fact that when he says, by any means necessary, he is saying, get violent and liberate these camps. And that is dangerous. And we see where it goes. Here's where I am. If we have doctors, historians, and leading congresspeople calling these facilities torture facilities and concentration camps, what exactly are we going to do about it? For all the years we've read and heard about them, yada, 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 that's exactly where we are right now. I swear I am not trying to be inflammatory. I don't mean this as a threat of violence or physical force, but I thought that concentration camps were supposed to be liberated. You see the caveat. I'm not saying you should, but aren't we supposed to? And where does it go? Where does it go? It seems like our game plan is to focus on defeating Trump. You didn't do anything about Obama when he was doing this. Okay? I'm glad you're concerned about it now, but this is what's so dangerous and disingenuous. I absolutely did call out Obama for what he was doing. Absolutely, as did many journalists. But where was Sean King and his ilk? They were nowhere to be found. And now the problem has escalated because the Democrats laughed at the border crisis and called it a hoax or a manufactured crisis. They now use the problem they've created. I don't mean like the moderate Democrats who are now agreeing with it. They're kind of oblivious. I'm talking about people like Sean King who mock and ridicule Trump. And now the problem has gotten so bad, they say it's a concentration camp and then call for liberation by any means necessary. He said, I always wondered how concentration camps lasted for so many years during the Holocaust. But now that we have our own, I see how. It's a mix of fear, indifference, and a lack of political will. We see the consequences of doing nothing. But it seems as though we've put all our eggs into the basket of a far-off election, and I don't feel good about it. What do you think's going to happen when Donald Trump wins in 2020? Do you think it will end there? We saw riots in DC on Inauguration Day. Hundreds of people setting fires, smashing windows. Hundreds of people were arrested. I was one of them. I was released before being processed, and I was never charged. But I was in that group. I got out because I had a press pass. Now, a lot of these people say Tim was never arrested because they conflate being brought to a jail with being arrested. No. I was told specifically I was under arrest. I was then released without charge. That happens a lot. It wasn't a detainment. I was not free to go. I had been arrested and I was in the corral. I got out. I asked for a supervisor. It's a complicated story. Hundreds of people were arrested in these riots, and they said the government was wrong to try and charge them with conspiracy. And you know what? There are civil liberty arguments there. But we have a problem when you have hundreds of people dressing in uniform in an effort to obfuscate their identities and hide perpetrators of crimes from the police. And now we have Antifa attacking an ICE facility. You know, a bomb was planted at a police department in the Pacific Northwest a couple months ago, following an incident where a far leftist drew a gun on police and was killed. Protesters came about a week later, saying the cops had killed a comrade, and about a week after that, a bomb was found. Kid you not. Take a look at this story from the other day. Protesters tear down American flag from ICE facility and replace it with Mexican flag. When Ocasio-Cortez said these were concentration camps, I called it. There's going to be some wacko who's going to say it must be done, and they're going to do it. And it's terrifying. And now I'm telling you this. Donald Trump, because of these things, will win. I think he will. I could be wrong. Okay, I was wrong with the midterms. I thought the Republicans would do better. I don't think I'm the smartest person in the world. But I look at a story with the American flag being pulled down from an ICE facility and a Mexican flag being raised, and I think about regular Americans and what they're thinking about all this. A lot of Americans aren't paying attention, won't know. They won't know this happened. So I'll say this one more time. If you made it this far, share this video so people know what just happened at this ICE facility. We can talk about far-right extremists all day and night. We do. The media covers it heavily. But they provide excuses and cover when Antifa does these things. They act like it's just nothing. Don't worry about it. It's certainly not me. You can blame some conservatives for downplaying far-right extremists. Of course. Not me. I made 3 or 4 videos about Charlottesville when it happened. Now that this happens, I'll make a video about this. But there is something to be said. When the far-right engages in their acts, you know, far-right, whatever you want to call them, you get the mainstream media across the board shrieking. When Andy Ngo was viciously beaten in the streets, a gay Asian journalist, we had New York Times journalists excusing what happened, saying he should have known better. That's the New York Times. That's where we are in this country. And that's why it's so damn dangerous. Because Antifa is allowed to operate with impunity on Twitter, calling for escalation. And it's not an exaggeration. Here's someone calling for escalation. Let's pop over here. Take a look at this. Remember who the real terrorists are. Republicans, they say. You've got this post. Ian Mal Chong is highlighting. There's a lot of people calling for more. Let's just scroll down. Look at this. People ignoring what happened, blaming the right. People saying thank you for your bravery to this man. Saying he reminded us all. Saying that they're calling out the right and they don't care about this. There are people actually saying that they want more. They're saying, shocked that people would disapprove of this man. I kid you not. When you search the hashtag, it's what you get. I don't know what else to say. But I'll tell you this. What do you think happens when Sean King says, by any means necessary? People will carry it out. So I'll end with one more thought. Where do we go from here? A few possibilities. I can make a few predictions. I think actions like this, the escalation, the beating of people in the streets, the tearing down of an American flag, it's going to send a signal, a terrifying one, to Americans. I have friends who are just moderate liberals from urban, from cities. It's where I'm from. And I've talked to them, and I'll tell you what they're concerned about. It's their paycheck, paying rent. They're not as concerned about undocumented immigrants as woke Twitter would have you believe. Woke Twitter is just giving a pass to violent extremism, while regular Americans are scared of what's happening. While certainly many blame Trump because they believe the rhetoric they see on the news, this becomes undeniable. Sean King said, by any means necessary. And then we see this man. He does this. I'll tell you this. People in America, regular citizens who aren't paying attention, you know what they're concerned about? Healthcare. They are. They want to make sure that they can go to the doctor when they're sick. They're not concerned about paying taxes to provide healthcare to non-citizens who just got here. Some are, for sure. I'm not saying those people who care aren't American. I'm saying most middle Americans are thinking, if I pay into taxes into the Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, am I going to get those benefits? The Democrats all raised their hands on the stage saying they would give health care from the government to undocumented immigrants. I almost said something that didn't make sense. Undocumented immigrants. What do you think that says to American citizens? When Obama promised universal health care, the debate was that it was too expensive. We couldn't even provide it to our own citizens. What do you think is going to happen now when someone who has a decent private insurer and likes it, and they're a Democrat, is told their private insurance will be abolished and their tax money will go to pay for the health care of non-citizens? I assure you, they won't be voting Democrat. I've talked to a few people I've known who are older and lifelong Democrats who said they'll likely be voting independent. They hate Trump, but the Democrats have lost it. What do you think is going to happen now with these stories? I tell you this, my prediction, Trump will win 2020. I could be wrong. I don't know what the probability is. I just feel like with all these stories, maybe I know more than the average person. I think that's fair. But I think it's going to come to a point when we look at these Democratic debates and people are going to be like, I don't know what I'm seeing anymore. Even the New York Times saying Americans feel like strangers in their own country. Trump wins. These people will be emboldened. You saw Sean King saying, what are we supposed to do? Hope that we can defeat Trump? Okay, great. For those that do. What do you think will happen when they don't defeat Trump? They're going to escalate, and it's going to get worse. Let me know what you think. Comment below. We'll keep the conversation going. Stick around. More stories to come, and I will see you all in the next segment at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out. Share this video because I assure you it'll be demonetized and deranked. Thanks. I'll see you next time.